Hey guys, if you do not have your materials, pause this video right now and grab your board marker, eraser, or paper and a pencil. So in today's mini lesson, we talked about how we subtract mixed numbered fractions where we don't necessarily have to borrow or when we do have to borrow. So we have two different examples. And the first example we're going to look at is 4 3/4 minus 1 1/4. So go ahead and write that on your board and follow along and solve with me as we go. So the first thing we want to look at, no matter what, is we first stop and look at our fraction. And if the fraction on top is larger than the fraction on bottom, then I know I can go ahead and subtract my whole numbers, subtract my fractions, and my problem is solved. So looking at this problem, is my top fraction numerator larger than my bottom? Well, yes, I can take 3 minus 1. So let's start from the beginning. 4 minus 1 is 3. Go ahead and write that down. And then we're going to subtract our numerators. 3 minus 1 is 2. And my denominator is 4. And then we would want to simplify. So moving on to our next example, we have 5 3/7 minus 2 6/7. So before we do anything, we have to look at our fractions. Is my top numerator, my first numerator, larger than my bottom numerator? No, it is not. So I am not going to subtract my whole numbers yet. First, I have to borrow. So I'm going to borrow from my whole. So just like what we do when we're subtracting multi-digit subtraction problems, we borrow from our next place value over. So in this case, our next place value over is our whole number. So we are going to borrow, we're going to take away one of our wholes from our 5 wholes. So instead of having 5 wholes, now we have 4 wholes. And what are we going to do with that whole that we've taken away? Well, we're going to chop it up into a fraction. And whatever we chop it up into, it has to have the same denominator, right? So our whole for this with 7 as a denominator is 7/7. So we're going to be adding 7/7 to the 3/7 that are already there. So 3 plus 7 is 10. And my denominator always stays the same, which is 7. So now, is my top fraction larger than my bottom fraction? Absolutely. So now I can go ahead and solve. So let's go ahead and subtract our whole numbers. 4 minus 2 is 2. And our numerators, 10 minus 6 is 4. And then my denominator is 7. All right. We're going to go ahead and do another example. So I would like for you to go ahead and write on your board 3 6/8 minus 2 4/8. Go ahead and solve. All right, so now that you've solved this problem, the first thing we look at is our numerator larger than our denominator? It is, so hopefully this question was pretty easy for us. So let's go ahead and check our answers. 3 minus 2 is 1, 6 minus 4 is 2, and our denominator is 8. So our answer to this problem was 1 2/8. All right, our next problem is 3 3/10 minus 1 6/10. Pause this video and go ahead and solve. All right, so now that you have solved this problem, the first thing we look at is our top numerator larger than our bottom numerator? It is not. So hopefully before we solved this, we borrowed. So we're going to take away 1 from our 3, and that turns into a 2. We're going to add our whole number that we've chopped that whole number into, so it's turned into a 10/10. And so now 3/10 plus 10/10 equals 13/10. And now we can subtract because my top numerator is larger than my bottom numerator. So 2 minus 1 is 1. 13 minus 6 is 7. And then our denominator is 10. So our total answer is 1 7/10. So if you struggled with any of these problems, make sure that you practice again before moving on to your exit ticket. Good luck!